please welcome co-founder and CEO, Mance Harmon.
Hello, future.
Throw your ex in the trash, 'cause I'm your new girl. Newsflash, hey honey, I'll give you the
Thank you,
world. I'm the
thank
freak
you.
with the heat that you're looking
Welcome
for.
to everyone here in Dallas, and to those of you around the world joining us through live stream. We're glad that you're with us. What an amazing year it's been. A full year of firsts for us. I could not be more excited to have you here with us to kick off our first annual developer conference, Hedera 18. This conference represents the first opportunity for the companies building on Hedera to present their projects to our community. Here are just a few of the speakers that we will have for you today. John West of Thomson Reuters, Simon Olson from Magazine Louisa, Craig Drabick from TXMQ, Leslie Ankney from Forbes Crypto Markets, and Daniel Rice of SageWise. We will also hear from part of our team, Patrick Harding, SVP of Product for Hedera, Paul Madsen, Senior Technical Architect, Ken Anderson, Chief Developer Advocate, and of course, Lehman Baird. We're honored to have such a wide variety of sponsors here supporting us at this conference. We're so thankful for your support. I had the opportunity yesterday to walk around and meet each one of them in the lobby out here, and of course we encourage you to go out and meet them as well. Many thanks to the developer community. We just launched the mainnet about 4 weeks ago, and we already have over 50 Dapps that have signed agreements to build on top of the Hedera platform. You are the visionaries, the pioneers, the ones that are embarking on this journey with us to build a better future. These are the Dapps that have already responded to the challenge of what future will you build? The developer community is building a brand new breed of applications that disrupt existing markets and create new ones for years to come. In fact, we've just wrapped up our first 8-city, 2-day global decentralized hackathon. We'll be announcing the winners this afternoon. This was the first time that developers in the community got hands-on experience with the SDK that we just launched last week. We challenged these developers from all around the world to see what future they can build, and we're going to take a quick look now at the hackathons from around the world. Very cool. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. So thank you so much to everyone that participated in the hackathon. There were a lot of great projects. You're going to hear about a few of them today, and we'll announce the global winner this afternoon. Some of those companies are here as sponsors. Please be sure to visit the sponsors, and you'll be able to talk to the teams that are building these projects. We want you to learn and network and, of course, have fun. So now I'm going to spend just a few minutes on how we got to where we are today. As many of you already know, back in 2012, Lehman Baird, my co-founder, the inventor of the Hashgraph, had a vision for how the way the internet should work, how people should be able to reach out and carve out a slice of cyberspace and create virtual environments in which they work together and play together and exchange goods and services with one another without the need to trust a central party with their data and privacy. And I remember many evenings at a Starbucks in Cedar Park, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin, about 3.5 hours south of here, many evenings sitting at that Starbucks with Lehman, going over the latest thought, the latest work that he had done, a lot of rabbit holes that led to nowhere for many years, until 2015, the Hashgraph was born. Hedera Hashgraph is dedicated to realizing that original vision, a trusted, secure environment that makes the world a safer place for all of us to live. But who is Hedera? In other words, who are we as a company? To answer that question, I think it's important to talk about our core values. Here is what we individually and corporately strive to be: a company of integrity. We're trustworthy, truthful, and positive. We hold ourselves to the highest of ethics. We do the right thing even when nobody is watching. We're dedicated to service. We make the world a better place. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And in everything, we pursue excellence. We strive for the best in what we create and in what we do in every part of the business. And we are a team. We take care of each other. We consider ourselves a family, and we work together as a family. These are our core values. And for everyone here and you that are watching the live stream, we're inviting you to come along with us on this journey. We're grateful for you, for those of you that already have, and we hope that you go with us to improve the world together. Today, you're going to hear from some of the more than 100 Dapps that are building on us. I'd like to highlight just a few of these organizations today and this morning. Companies like Almond, that's focused on the environment by incentivizing us to lower our carbon footprint, or companies like Hero FM that matches fans with artists to fairly and quickly compensate the musicians for the work that they're building via micropayments. Or how about Guard Global, working to lessen the environmental impact of electricity by developing renewable energy via cross-border microgrids. And then there's Carbon Money, who is here with us today as well, that was moved to create a stable coin due to the volatility of currencies in developing countries. And Organifi, that's focused on building trust in what we eat by tracking the supply chain of organic goods from farm to table. And then finally, Certara, that's improving patient outcomes in the pharmaceutical industry. Actually, let's hear from one of their technology leaders, Jim Nasser.
My father, over the last few years, he had declined into some mild dementia. He lives in the UK, and my assumption was, since I hadn't heard anything, that everything was good. Then I go there and visit him, and he's looking extremely weak. He can barely walk. It turned out he had a massive brain aneurysm, and there were many symptoms that something was wrong. The issue was there was a disconnection between people who saw him versus the physicians who were not there. Could technology have helped in this? Yeah, I firmly believe so. In health and pharma life sciences, traditionally, you have a lot of closed systems. You have what I think of as siloed data and lack of interoperability. When the data is in a proprietary format and tied to a specific application, that data is very hard to uncover. Open Pharma is the ambitious initiative that I'm undertaking with my team at Certara, building a large-scale set of open technologies that are interoperable by design, that materially impact patient outcome. One of the things I've been working on over the last few months is around this problem of the generic drug supply shortage. What we've done is effectively take data that is in the supply chain and then use our modern real-time indexing and search technologies to aggregate and then also tie it to Hedera for real-time transactional information that can be surfaced through a portal. As an example, a regulator, it could be the FDA in this case, could log in and see a real-time flow of what's happening throughout this entire supply chain. As technologists, we're not here just to build software to make profit. You know, people like us, the work I'm doing with my open technologies and people like Hedera and other innovators, we have a chance to actually make a real human impact, and that's important.
These are just a few of the companies that are working with us to improve the planet one Dapp at a time. So why would these companies choose Hedera over other possibilities? Well, it starts with an algorithm. It starts with the hash graph. And to understand the value of the hash graph, it's important to understand what the other consensus algorithms are in the market and how Hedera is different. So let's take just a few minutes to talk about that field of consensus technology. Half of the market uses what we call leader-based systems. These algorithms are used in permission networks, not the public DLTs, but the private or permission DLTs. And they're used there because they have better performance than the public DLTs, but they're not nearly as secure. And it's really easy to understand how these work. Each one of these computers is a node in the network, and each computer locally has a copy of a database. Remember, the whole point of the entire category of distributed ledgers is to keep these local copies of a database, a replicated database, in sync with one another. And that's it. That's the goal of the technology. Each member, maybe it's a bank, has a local copy of the database. When any member wants to change their database, they send that change or transaction to an elected leader. The leader takes all of those transactions, puts them into an order, and then passes those transactions in that order back down to every computer. Each computer receives the transactions in the same order. They apply them to their local copy of the database, and that's how the databases stay in sync. There's some problems. Number one, there is a leader, and if there's a leader to attack. If any single computer in the network is compromised, either by a malicious insider or an external threat, if that attacker can do a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack against the leader, they can bring down the entire network for everybody. A single compromised computer can bring down the entire network. Now, what would happen? Within a second or two, the network would realize the leader's no longer talking to us. So they would elect a new leader. But by design, each member of the network has to know the address of the leader so they can send their transactions to the leader, including the compromised computer. And so the attacker just changes the target of the attack. They can keep the network down indefinitely as long as they can maintain the DDoS attack. This is a problem. You can process about 1,000 transactions per second with this architecture, and that's the reason this is used rather than proof-of-work blockchain for permission networks. It's far less expensive, but it's got some serious security problems. Compare that to proof-of-work blockchain. In this case, we have the miners. These represent mining rigs. Every miner receives every transaction. So if Alice wants to pay Bob a token, that transaction goes to every miner. Every miner collects all transactions. They put them into a block. And then they compete with one another to try and solve a hard cryptographic puzzle. The miner that solves that puzzle first earns the right to publish their block, sending it to all the other miners. They validate it. They put it on top of their local copy of the chain of blocks of transactions, the blockchain. The problem with this approach is that it's extremely expensive and very slow. Bitcoin blockchain, 5 transactions per second. Ethereum today, 15 transactions per second. The cost per transaction is on the order of 50 cents. I've seen it as high as $60 per transaction. So incredibly inefficient, expensive, not very slow, not very fast. And it's more secure. You don't know who is going to win the competition, so you don't know who to perform a DDoS attack against. So there's this trade-off between security and performance between these two categories. The market understands the problems with proof-of-work blockchain, and the market has moved toward this model that we call a simulated economy. Basically, there are a lot of variants of this, but they all have the same premise. If we can create a system of economic incentives and apply that system to all of the nodes in the network, each one of these represents a computer now, not a mining rig. There's no proof of work. It's a lot less expensive. If we can apply that system of economic incentives to all the nodes in the network, then there will be this emergent behavior where the nodes come to an agreement on what block to put on top of the chain and which block not to put on top of the chain or to discard. There are some problems with this in that it's impossible to say anything objectively about the security of the system. It's not possible to write a math proof that proves that a single attacker can't prevent the network from coming to consensus, let alone prove that a large group of colluding attackers can't prevent the network from coming to consensus. In the same way that if we took the world's best mathematicians and asked them to write a math proof that the local stock market would not crash if we operated it by a certain set of rules, they can't write that math proof. Why not? Because it's too complex to formally analyze, let alone write a math proof that proves it will never crash. These simulated economies suffer from the same problems. So what do you do? There is a category of consensus algorithm called voting-based algorithms, pure voting-based algorithms. It goes back 30 years. And these algorithms work very simply. Each one of these computers in the network has, again, a local copy of the database. Each transaction is sent to every other computer in the network. And then the computers are asked to vote on the order of transactions. And when a single computer, let's say Alice, sends her vote to every other computer, and when a computer receives that, they send a receipt, not just back to Alice, but to everybody. And so just the bandwidth requirements to process the voting and the receipts blows up exponentially in the number of computers in the network and the number of transactions in the system. And there may be many rounds of transactions or voting, required to put transactions into an order. They're not practical, is the bottom line. It's practical for a half dozen computers. It's not practical for the types of systems that we want to build today. But they are important. And they're important because they achieve the very best security that one can achieve, one that's the theoretical limits of what can be achieved for security in distributed systems. It's something called asynchronous byzantine fault tolerance. They're ABFT. And for that reason, they're important. The challenge then is, how do you build an algorithm that is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, but you're not required to send the votes or receipts over the network? That's the question. How do you achieve this without the bandwidth requirement? That's what Hashgraph is. So what Lehman realized is that it's possible to achieve a new kind of voting, what we call virtual voting. And it works something like this. You have a computer, and remember, each one of these computers has a local copy of the database. It's a replicated database, and so any transaction that gets created has to go to every member in the network. That's the minimum bandwidth that is required. All transactions have to go to everybody. Again, let's say that this computer in the bottom left is Alice. If Alice has a transaction that she's going to send to the network, she can add a tiny amount of information on top of that. Basically, a digest or a hash of the last transaction or message that she received from somebody else, perhaps Ed, just sent Alice a message, a hash of that message, and a hash of the last message that she previously created. That's it. 2 hashes, and these hashes are only a few bytes of information. She adds that metadata on top of the transaction or the payload that she wants to send into the network. She sends that into the network, gossips that into the network. Everyone receives it. Everyone gets the transaction and the 2 hashes. And everyone that's creating transactions does the same thing. We can then take this metadata, these hashes, and create a picture of the flow of information across the network. The hash graph, that's what it is. And every computer in the network has an identical copy of the hash graph. They all have, provably, the same picture that makes it possible for them to reason about who knew what and when they knew it. They then take a voting algorithm, and they all have the same voting algorithm. And now, when Alice wants to know what Bob would vote on the order of transactions, rather than asking Bob to cast a vote over the network, she simply looks into the hash graph, and there's enough information there for her to calculate what Bob would vote. And she can do the same thing, not just for Bob, but for every member in the community. She calculates what the votes would be if she were to ask them to send the vote. And because every member has the same hash graph and they're using the same voting algorithm, they all calculate the same answers to the question of what would the community vote, and they all come up with the same answer. In other words, they are in consensus on the order of transactions without ever sending a vote over the network. It's as efficient as you can be in terms of bandwidth usage, and it achieves the theoretical limits of what can be achieved in terms of security in a distributed consensus algorithm. But that's just an algorithm, and it's not sufficient to overcome the obstacles to mainstream adoption of public distributed ledger technology in the market today. We identified 4 when starting Hedera. 2 are technology, performance. You have to do far better than 5 transactions per second. Security. If we're going to be building a platform that processes trillions of dollars of value, then you know it's going to be attacked. So you have to start with the very best building block possible, a block that is asynchronous BFT. Stability. You have to have a platform that anybody that's considering spending a few $1 million to build an enterprise app on top of, that they know it will not fork, that they're not going to have to deal with the chaos of forking and splitting of a platform into 2 competing platforms and cryptocurrencies. And then finally, if you can solve those problems, who is governing this global network and global platform? Can we trust the organization behind the platform? Hedera has answers to all 4 of those obstacles. And it seems like a long time ago, but it was actually just 7 months ago when we unveiled these plans, our plans for a public DLT built on Hashgraph in New York City back in March of this year. Let's take a quick look. Raising the bar for the industry, we're Hedera. We consider this a mission to maximize the internet to what it can be tomorrow.
'Cause I'm the new best thing, better than you've ever seen.
Fair, fast, and secure.
Trusted transactions, whether that's voting or consensus.
First of all, it's not fairness, it's fairness of ordering, fairness of timestamps, fairness of access.
We open up a whole new genre of applications.
Out with the old and in with the new. I sparkle like a ruby pot of gold for you. All sugar and spice, you know I'm not nice, but I'll send you down the road straight to paradise.
The Hedera Hashgraph technology platform has implications that stretch all the industries on planet Earth.
I'm the new best thing,
So that was a lot of fun. That was a major milestone for us. We worked for years to get to that point. It seems like a lifetime ago. So what have we been up to since March? Well, let's do a quick review in terms of business, technology, and governance. We've published the white paper in March that describes our vision for what this world can be using Hashgraph as the basis for a public network. We did a lot of API reviews with the developer community, and we built a developer portal. We did a world tour, 4 continents, spent a lot of weeks visiting cities around the world, meeting the developer community, business partners. A lot of effort went into reaching out and engaging the world as a global community. We built a pipeline of more than 100 Dapps that we now have being built on top of the platform. We launched our developer advocacy program, and we developed partnerships with accelerators and system integrators. And of course, we raised a lot of money, $124 million. In terms of the technology, we now have a mainnet that's been launched. The tokens are generated. There are 50 billion tokens in the Hedera wallet. The API specification is complete, and we've published the SDK, and many of you have already seen and used that in the hackathon that's just been completed. And then, in addition, we now have formalized proofs of correctness of the proof of correctness that Lehman built or created 2 years ago. So Lehman's going to talk a lot more about this, but we've used a technology called formal methods, which basically makes it possible to take a computer and then have the computer check the correctness of the math proof that proves that Hashgraph as an algorithm is in fact asynchronous BFT. And that computer program written in COQ is now published and on our website. And for those that are mathematicians in the industry and care about such things, and they are very important, you can go and download it and take a look. In terms of governance, we continue to make strong progress with the council. We've signed many more LOIs, letters of intent. We've finalized the LLC agreement. We had an initial meeting 3 weeks ago in New York City where a large group of this initial set of council members joined us for 2 days of work on preparing to the council and how we're going to operate and work together in the coming days. And we've engaged in a dialogue with the SEC to ensure that the activities that we're pursuing today and that those that we'll pursue in the future are compliant with existing and future regulation. That's what we've been up to. But where are we today? Well, let's talk about some of the unique features of the platform that we've built in that I think are interesting and add a lot of value to the community. First off, ABFT, already said. But when you start with ABFT as a building block, an algorithm that's ABFT as a building block, it turns out that the house that you build from that block looks very different than a house that can be built from a block that's not ABFT. And what that really means is that when the system is at scale, when we've introduced sharding to create a global network of tens of thousands of nodes, if not more, that system as a whole will maintain the asynchronous BFT property, and that's coming. State proofs. What are state proofs? In just a sentence or two, it makes it possible for you to ask the balance of your account from a node and be assured that the node is not lying to you about that balance, or ask for the results of a file, or whether a file even exists in the network, or ask for the results of a smart contract, and you can be assured that the node that you ask will never be able to lie about the answer. Hierarchical multisig. We make it possible for you, the developers, to use N of M threshold keys, where each one of the keys, each one of the N itself can be a hierarchical multisig signature, N of M threshold key. What about the services? There are 3 to start: cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and file storage. For the cryptocurrency service, it enables micropayments directly on graph, not a side chain, not something separate, on graph, cryptocurrency with native support for micropayments, with a very high throughput and very low latency. In addition, we have something that we call claims, which makes it possible for you to have an authority attach credentials to your account, and then you can prove that those credentials have not been revoked. And this will become really important for a lot of different use cases, including critically important for KYC, a KYC solution when users want to use it. In terms of smart contracts, we now have support for Solidity up and running. Many of you have used it this week. It enables, and Realms, and a concept that we've introduced, makes it possible for developers to run Solidity smart contracts in parallel. Optional binding arbitration. Optionally, an individual or a group can provide binding arbitration for the smart contracts that they've created. Or what about file storage? Our file storage is Byzantine. It's a replicated file storage system. It's Byzantine, and what that means is that we can not only prove that the file has been stored on the network, we can prove that the file has been deleted. Cryptographically prove to a third party that the file has been deleted, which will become really important for GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. Controlled mutability. This makes it possible for the Governing Council to comply with GDPR and other similar regulations. So this is our symbol. This is the digital currency that we believe is going to change the world. This is called an HBAR. Hedera removes the fundamental obstacles that we believe are preventing adoption of this public DLT category. We've solved the problems of performance and security. We provide stability, a guarantee that the platform will not fork, with a governing council that is the most decentralized governing council of any of the public platforms. Ultimately, a council of 39 global enterprises that span industries across 18 sectors, span geographies chosen from every continent around the globe, and are term limited, so they span time as well. The most decentralized organization that represents the interests of the entire global community.